Life Audio.
This is Empowering Homeschool Conversations.
We want families to come here and gain insightful strategies that empower them to successfully teach diverse learners at home.
Hosted by founder and CEO of SPED Homeschool, Peggy Ployer.
Our goal is that these powerful weekly conversations will boost your confidence to cultivate the best at-home learning environment for your student.
For more homeschool resources, go to spedhomeschool.com. You're listening to Empowering Homeschool Conversations with Peggy Ployer. We'll start the conversation with Peggy and her guests next.
Feeling stressed? Let's take better care of you. I'm Bonnie Gray, the host of Breathe, the Stress Less podcast. Subscribe at lifeaudio.com.
The Historical Jesus Podcast is the sweeping saga of the life and times of Galilean Jesus of Nazareth, as well as the faith, religion, and church founded to honor and disseminate his acts and teachings. Join me, Mark Vinette, on this fascinating journey through time, exploring the many great works of Christian theology, literature, architecture, music, and art, inspired by the words and deeds of Jesus Christ.
This is Empowering Homeschool Conversations, provided by SPED Homeschool, a nonprofit that empowers families to home educate diverse learners. To learn more, visit spedhomeschool.com. Here's Peggy Ployer.
Today we are going to talk about homeschool curriculum customization methods. And actually, we're going to take you through with my guest today, Andrew Phan, co-founder of the Vocal Gym. We're going to go step by step through a methodology that he has developed on how you can actually customize your own curriculum step by step, how to do it. And I know that that's just exciting in itself. Andrew is a multi-talented creative expert holding degrees in music and film and television production. And after a decade as a producer and a travel and food journalist for the Sydney Morning Herald from his native home in Australia, he delved into the publishing world, co-editing Amazon's best-selling book, The 7 Dimensions of Singing. Andrew has also dedicated the last 5 years to studying unique learning techniques with a focus on ADHD-informed pediology, only after recently discovering ADHD, his own ADHD as an adult. He brings his specialized expertise to this role as co-founder of the Vocal Gym for Homeschool, a revolutionary online program that offers individualized ADHD-friendly vocal training. The course is lauded for its patented methodology and provides an affordable, effective alternative to traditional voice lessons. Welcome, Andrew. I am so excited to have you on the show today.
Thanks, Peggy. And what an introduction you gave me. You know, like all together. That's quite a lot.
It's a mouthful for sure. And it shows I didn't read it ahead of time. And I just kind of, that happens, you're live.
What can you do? We're doing it live.
Exactly. And so if you're joining us live, we are broadcasting for the first time new on Instagram. So super excited about that. But just know that you can put your comments, your questions in the feed wherever you're watching from, whether you're watching from Twitter, let's see, YouTube, Facebook. I know there's a couple other ones in there, but we would like you to be part of this conversation. If there's some specific curriculum woes that you're going through with homeschooling and you want to know, how do I customize that? Throw it in the comments. We would love to address those specifically at the end of the conversation. We do have one question that was submitted ahead of time by one of our subscribers to our email. So just know that in upcoming episodes, if you look on what we're going to be talking about, you can also do it that way if you can't join us live. So Andrew, I just love when I start out my show to ask my guests just to tell a little bit about themselves, just maybe something beyond your bio that would be interesting for our guests, and to really give them an idea of why this topic specifically is important to you.
So you saw the career history, but I think one of the big things for me early on was I I kept jumping, that was such a huge list. I kept jumping from one career choice to another. And after a while, friends would ask me, like, why are you so sporadic in your decision? And I kept racking my brain, kept thinking, like, maybe it's because I'm a millennial, we can't sit still. But I kind of started to see a thread in all of the things. Firstly, that, I actually was a performance major. I was a singer on stage, and that's how I met Richard, and when we co-founded the Vocal Gym. Yeah. And then moving from there, I moved into management, and I became a photojournalist. And then it's like sound and picture. So then I went to film school. But like there was a big thing for me. And it kind of all came together in this conversation of I'm very big on story. I find that when we understand story, the structure of it, how it works, who we are as people, how we think, all of it really leads back to story. Story is the one tool that we can, it's kind of like the vessel for change. It's like, it's the thing that helps us without having to live that experience ourselves. When we can connect and relate, it leads to us growing and changing. So I was so fascinated by that structure. And then everything that I did, I always tied back to the fundamental question, which is the why. Why do we do things this way? Why do we think this way? What made us change our minds? And it all fundamentally led back to why. So, all of that is, and then on top of that, what really hit this whole thing off was discovering I had ADHD.
Yeah. That's a game changer when you kind of realize that what is happening behind the scenes with what's causing you to make decisions and do things the way you do. I know I have a EDS, which is an issue with my connective tissue, and I can't sit still for very long. And I kept going, am I just a nervous person? Why can't I sit in a chair? My husband's like, why can't you ever sit still? You're always up and you're moving and you're sitting on your feet. And they're like, because if I sit still, it hurts, but that revelation like gave me freedom to go, oh yes, it's not just me being quirky. It's something I do for survival almost. And it's just the way I just have to embrace it. And then you feel like, oh yeah, this feels right. So I totally get that understanding with have that diagnosis too.
Oh, totally. I think it's when you finally have the freedom to say it's okay and I can move forward. The first step is acknowledging that that's in existence, and then we can move from there. I think the challenge, and I'm sure parents at home with their kids as well, if they have learning differences or they might have ADHD like me, it's hard sometimes, particularly when it comes to certain brain disorders, to separate the sense of self and value and then a disorder that you have to work around. So it's about building like really good tools and understanding the fundamental of someone maybe with a learning difference. And hopefully we can talk a little about those things as we move through the plan.
Right,
but to really understand what makes us tick, those who don't maybe have ADHD, and as well as how does an ADHD person's brain respond differently to stimuli, and then building a system around that to help teach. So
absolutely. So Andrew has an amazing handout, and that we're going to kind of follow step by step through. So, and we're also going to work through a lesson plan that I got off the website from Matthew C. It was a pretty standard math program, but he's going to show us how to even customize it even more, and really how to teach your student, like you were just talking about, Andrew, those tools, you don't modify an curriculum or customize it just to make it easier, but you do it to teach your student how to learn and how to learn in a way that works for them. And so don't feel like you're just going, well, I have to change this. But no, Andrew's going to walk us through a process that you can teach your student how to better their learning experiences and their ability to learn. So I'm
100%.
super excited about this.
So we the lesson that we can talk through is one that will be attached with the handout. So that's great.
Yeah.
It's the one that you sent me. But I'll also try to reference, if it's not a math lesson, I also have How Your Voice Works, one of the lessons we have on the local gym.
Okay,
how we can
awesome.
apply that across
That's
too.
great. Yeah.
So let's jump
really
through
can apply
it. So
to anything, right? Yeah.
100%. So let's jump to number one.
Okay.
So this one goes without saying, that understanding the learner's needs. So gauge the learner's strengths and challenges through discussion and tailor your teaching methods. Now, one of the big things with this particular point is understanding the student and the person as a whole, not just in the subject that we're talking about. Like, how do they learn? How do they think? And that's great. But what else are they interested in? Do we notice any patterns in the way that they're learning? Are there topics that they're particularly interested in? Is there anything that they're particularly focused on? And it's not just that. What resistances do they have? Do they have a preference?
Yeah,
for
the positives and the minuses all mixed in there. Yes.
100%. And just looking at my notes here too, it's breaking the lesson down into those short kind of segments, particularly like if they have problem with paying attention for an extended period of time, automatically take the lesson plan and see, are there sectionable parts? So just looking at the lesson plan that we have, which is the lesson 8 that you have there, it's got division by 6. And when looking through there, you can see there are systematic systems. Like there's a review part, there's a lesson practice, and there's little bits of examples as well. So maybe instead of allocating to do a complete lesson on their own, work in sections. So that's someone with, say, ADHD and they can't hold attention. But I'll go into a little bit more detail about that. And the same with the link, if you look at How the Voice Works on the link at the bottom of the attachment, you can also see it's broken up into a video section. There's some diagrams and some reviews. So don't try to take the whole thing at once. So it's little bits of understanding, particularly your person, looking at them as a whole. So a complete and comprehensive profile. So Peggy, that's what are your thoughts?
We talk a lot about this in our in past episodes, but I think it's so nice to hear that, this is the child in the lesson plan have to kind of mesh. And we often just look at the child without the perspective of the lesson plan. And so I love that you brought both of those together. But that's perfect, because I think we often try to just say, okay, so my child learns like this and they have these things, but now I still have to stuff them into this lesson that was given to me. And Andrew just gave you the freedom not to do that. So yes.
Yeah. And I remember us talking about that earlier too, about how just because someone designed a curriculum a certain way does not mean that is the best way for your child to learn.
Absolutely.
And it's also I remember now that really big point of if for example, like traditional education encourages us to have good structure or be set in our ways that we do things. And that's a skill and a trait we want to inculcate in our children and our students as well. But if you're trying to help them learn math at the same time, it's kind of choosing which is the priority in that particular moment. So effectively not dividing what it is and the focus you're achieving in the lesson that you have, and maybe saving how to learn at a different time than when you're trying to learn math, for example.
Exactly. Yes. One thing at a time sometimes.
Cool. So we'll jump to the next one.
So the next, number 2.
This is a big one for me. This one, I'll talk a little bit about this point, and this is a really, really good point to take into account. So in particular with ADHD, in general, people with ADHD have either an undersupply or an underutilization of dopamine. So dopamine is one of a few neurotransmitters in the brain. So imagine them as cars traveling down the highway with actions. So they drive down the highway with actions. And the vehicle for dopamine, so there's a few. There's serotonin, which controls, euphoric happiness. There's norepinephrine, which is the fight or flight when we're under stress. And there's a few others, but dopamine is the one that makes you feel accomplished, a job well done, hard work. We enjoy hard work. So people with ADHD either underutilize it or underproduce it. So oftentimes we don't feel the high or the satisfaction from completing work that lots of other people do. So and that's mainly from the part of our brain that controls executive function in the front here. So executive function is when me as a person, Andrew as a person says, I want to do this, but the rest of my body won't respond using the dopamine path. So that's why oftentimes you see kids with ADHD, they forget things or they can't focus on one thing, even though internally they want to do it. The frustration of that is incredibly challenging.
After a word from our sponsor, we'll dive back into this conversation.
Hey, Ted, what do you want to do today?
Well, Ashley, I've always got work to do, naps to take, but I have a better idea. How about we invite everyone to listen to the Team Us podcast?
I love that idea. Let's do it right now. Hi, everyone. We're Ted and Ashley Slater, and we'd love for you to join us as we talk about teamwork in marriage.
We share how grace, commitment, and cooperation can help couples live the everyday moments of marriage together.
To listen, go to lifeaudio.com and search for Team Us.
This is Empowering Homeschool Conversations, provided by SPED Homeschool. Go to spedhomeschool.com to get resources and support for teaching your unique learner at home.
But one of the tools that I found specifically effective for myself is using some of those other pathways. So norepinephrine creates the fight or flight response, and oftentimes we rely on that. But there are three key things that I know will help motivate me in particular, and this applies quite broadly. So that's incorporating challenge, novelty, and urgency. So those three things are challenge, novelty, and urgency, and I'll go through each of those. So challenge is if someone says to me, hey, Andrew, I don't think you can run a marathon. And you know what? Realistically, that's a little bit of crazy illustration. But if the challenge was big enough and I really wanted to run a marathon, amazing. That would be a trigger for me to start training. Number two is novelty. Is the concept or activity stimulating enough for my brain that it will say, Andrew, you want to go do that? That looks like so much fun.
Right.
That will also make me go and do things. But number three, the one I commonly use is urgency. Now, urgency is when I know this for sure. So going through college and also as a journalist, I would go on a 2-week travel writing trip, and I would come back and I would sit in front of a blank blinker to start the article, but I couldn't write until the day before.
Wow.
So in this situation, it's terrible. That's really terrible. So stressful too. But I would somehow the day before, and a lot of kids do this too with their assignments, they just get done the night before. And sometimes they do really well and some can cope and others really struggle because it's creating that urgency. And one of the big things that I like to do is to make sure that my triggers for things to get done is outside of my own internal decision-making. Oh. So that's a big one. So if there is a clock or a time or a podcast we have this afternoon, it will make sure that it will trigger me. So example, so if we're working on the math lesson, if we talk outside of the lesson plan and just about planning your lesson for the day, are there stimuli that you could use to trigger challenge, novelty, or urgency? So if you complete these questions accurately with a certain accuracy in under 20 minutes, it will reveal the next fun activity. your child may respond to good story and movement. So that might trigger excitement. It triggers, and the more you can hit, the better. If it's challenge, novelty, and urgency.
Yeah.
So if it's a novel idea, if there is a mystery box over there with what you might be having for lunch or a snack, but you can access that box only if you succeed within this time. So sometimes people might feel that as pressure, but it's more just taking the responsibility of decision making away from the executive function that isn't functioning to the rest of its body.
Oh, that's fascinating. Yes.
So there are lots of really cool things too. I've got one of these. I don't know if people can see them, but it's a wonderful little timer that has numbers on the side. So it has 5, 3, 25. Actually, I'll talk about that in another section, but it helps keep time in a certain way, and we'll go on. But it's really understanding what kind of challenges your student or child might respond to. A challenge to, that will stimulate them and make them move forward. What is their interest that they're tied to? Like if they're into sports, how can you attach your quiz to, like, there are 5 players on a basketball team,
right?
And there's a 6th man on the bench. Like using things that they're already interested in and adapting that to the lesson. I think what we talked about is the onus sometimes of, it's teaching and homeschooling is hard. Being a teacher is a lot harder than people give it credit for. And if we really want to be effective, we have to really cater to the way that our students learn. So that's a good little tip.
No, I love that, because some of this, like you talked about, you could take the lesson and incorporate those interests, that novelty as part of the lesson. But then some of it is just outside add. So the mystery box, all those things, those could be just tools you have at the ready, just when you break apart that lesson too. So things on both sides. So really easily adaptable for multiple different lesson type of scenarios, which is wonderful because parents need a lot of good ideas.
Right. Totally. All right. Let's jump to the next one.
Yes, the next one, segment lessons and managing time.
This one's great. So science-wise, our brain uses those little vehicles I was telling you, the neurotransmitters, to make us do things. That includes like moving our hands and arms, executive function, making us happy. Now, there is only enough to run for 50 minutes straight for dopamine. And so after 50 minutes, your brain's ability is diminished exponentially as you come down if you continuously push something. So
is that 15 or 50? Did you say
50?
50.
So if you go the full 50, then you have to have a minimum of 10 minutes of completely something else that isn't using that part of the brain. And physical exercise often helps speed that process up.
Yeah.
What is recommended is actually, if you can, even better, is if you can do 25 minutes and 5-minute breaks. So you're not fully running out of everything. But when you get to 50, your returns on learning and absorbing information pretty much go down. So
is that pretty much across the board for, I mean, I've heard in the past as like for younger children, it's even shorter, but I'm sure it is for as your brain's developing, but for the average human, I think from teenagers on, and particularly people with ADHD, this is really important, but 50 minutes, 50 and 10 or 25 and 5. Okay. So, and that's what I was saying to you earlier, and we'll talk about it in technology in a second. This is a really simple tool for somebody with ADHD, for example. I'm going to remove the slide just so we get a bigger view of you.
Yeah, see if you can do that. It's got numbers on this. See if I can make it.
I think when you pushed it, it lit up too or something.
I can make it light up. So I'm going to put it on, hold on, let me see if I can put it on the table and start the timer. So it's blinking. Oh, I can't make it light up now. But basically, you just have to put it down on the face of the number. And it is the allocated time. So if you've got 25-minute lesson,
cool. Yes.
Put the timer down on 25. You can easily just jump on Amazon. It'll start beeping, and then off you go. So everything from 5-minute break to 25 minutes, it's novel, it's fun enough, and it's really simple to do.
And it takes the pressure off of mom saying, it's time to get back to that table. No, the buzzers are going off, so it's time to go back.
And it's kind of like when we talk about structure, one of the things about homeschooling, of course, gives us so much flexibility in education.
Right.
But one of the great things about school is the regiment of this is when the bell goes, and that's when we jump to the next class. Like no matter where you're at, stop kind of thing. So 25 and 5 and then 50 and 10. So look at your lesson plan. My suggestion, as always, is observe, observe, observe. Look at previous lessons.
Great idea.
How long did it take them to go through certain sections? And then how long does it take them to absorb information? One of the great things, even though kids without learning differences that do utilize dopamine, is the feeling of success. If we compartmentalize the tasks and exercises down to something they can easily complete in that limit, it's the joy of I did good as opposed to I failed. And
you don't want to ever end on that, because that just makes getting started again so much harder.
It's such a repeating cycle over and over again. So definitely organize your lesson in segments of either 25 with a 5-minute physical activity break or 50 and 10. Okay. And that gives enough time for reuptake to happen for the neurotransmitters to get themselves going again.
Awesome.
Cool.
And so, number 4.
Number 4. Okay, so here are some ideas to incorporate different ways of learning. Now, there is a little bit of a myth of people saying that, oh, I'm a visual learner and I'm a sound learner. They actually did a study and found that we utilize them all. And there isn't any one that we're stronger towards, but it doesn't mean we can't utilize different stimuli. So, for example, when we are having a conversation with someone, we're listening to them talk, we're watching their body language, we're hearing changes in pitch for tone, we're absorbing information and learning how somebody is and the society around us, not just by the words that they're saying.
Right.
So
there's so much context that comes with that.
So much context. And the more context you present, the better it will be for the brain to absorb it. One of the exercises they have when you're trying to learn a new language, for example, is to keep tipping a balloon in the air. And every time you make contact with the word, you recite the word in the new language. What that's doing is it's using motor parts of your brain to reinforce, that's what they're learning at the same time. So the same works with context. So when we do illustrations, we're presenting an imaginary image that people can see. And then if we incorporate other activities in, particularly something someone's having a challenge with, it takes away the mundaneness of it. It stimulates other parts of the brain to connect that all together. So if there's particular lessons that are a struggle, if they struggle with numbers and math, how can we use physical objects and incorporate that into the lesson? How can we incorporate sound into the lesson? Like how many beeps did you hear? Or there are 3 birds, or there's lots of ways that we can specifically do that. So using multiple senses in density. Plus also what kids see these days in videos and on TikTok and all of their content, they're used to absorbing masses of contextual information at one time. So use multi-sensory approach.
Yes. Yeah. Don't just stick to one and say, oh, good, we checked that box off. But like Andrew is saying, pile it on using that multi sensory approach. And because you just never know what is going to trigger that connection in the brain to say, I'm going to anchor this one here because I remember something related to who knows what. And it's going to trigger that memory and cause that the long-term storage better.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. So,
cool.
Yeah.
So that's
all right. So next one, engage.
Number 5, interactively. Okay. So find different ways to have discussions, group activities, problem solving. But one of the fascinating things is, like we talked about in point 1. So if your child or student, say, loves Minecraft or Roblox, that's what the kids are playing.
Oh,
if you took the time to take personal interest and do you know how to go in there and create a little mini world that requires some math? Did you the lesson is on divide by 6. What if you asked them to build buildings in scales of 6?
Oh,
there's lots of ways that we can use interaction and those things. Just a quick note on a really good idea is to sit down and mind map. What do I know about my child? Draw a bunch of different circles. They love this. They love this. And then find a way to connect those dots. How can I incorporate a math lesson into Roblox? Mm-hmm. How can I incorporate something else into something else they're into? Or they have this regular friend that comes over. How can I give them an adventure or some kind of project that takes the application of those lessons? Take the lesson off the page.
Yeah, right. Oh, absolutely. Yes.
And I think that's such a really great way to teach. As a student, wow, I'm allowed to hey guys, I'm allowed to play Roblox during this for 20 minutes. There's a world there that I can build. That's amazing. And I think just the mindfulness in the way that we prepare our lessons is
absolutely. Yes. Well, and it teaches your student too that learning is not boring. And plus it's something you can apply in every aspect of life instead of just, well, it's one of those books we take out and we do school and then you put it away and then the rest of life happens. It's not, as we get older, we learn to feed ourselves, our brain, and also to interact with others. And so yes, the younger and sooner you can do that and make it fun and applicable, the more your student is going to want to engage in those things later on in life too. And I found the same true for my kids. They're always learning because we made it part of life.
I think also as a parent, well, I'm not personally a parent, but it's also going to build your relationship too. How understanding your child and communicating, and you are going to learn so much by you being a more effective teacher too. Just learn about yourself. Right. What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? How can I be a better teacher? How can I be a better parent? And I think it's just the feeling that someone tailored something specifically for you, knows how you think, knows how you feel, what's going to frustrate you, and has done the best that they could to take care of you like that. I think that's something you'll remember for the rest of your life as you're growing up too.
Absolutely. I love how you turned that, because a lot of parents will say, but I'm putting these, making it too easy for them, and I'm like, no, listen to Andrew. You're not making it too easy. You're making it show that you love your child and that they're important and what they're interested in is important and how they learn is important.
I think what you just said there hits it on the head too, of do you want them to learn the math lesson or do you want them to learn the math lesson the way you want to teach it? And that's the big thing. I only want to teach this way. I want them to learn this way. And if they don't, it's their fault for not studying hard enough. Mm-hmm. And that's such a challenge. It's like choosing the right time, like we talked about earlier, choosing the right time for the right lesson. Yes, we want them to be able to process information on their own independently. But is it effective? And if you try to do that while you're trying to help them learn something specifically. Oh, I remember we had a conversation earlier, Peggy, about if someone has social anxiety and you're trying to...
Oh, yes.
Yeah, do you want to talk?
Mm-hmm. It comes up often because I think a lot of people within our community, they remove their kids from a school setting because their child has social issues. Just anxiety issues. And so being in a school environment causes a lot of issues. My oldest, that's why we started homeschooling, because he was diagnosed with autism and he couldn't keep it together in a classroom. But then it seems like we lose this perspective really quick and we tried to join a co-op and all these other things. And I learned very quickly, this is not a good environment for my child to learn in overall. He needs to learn one-on-one and to have it customized, build a lot with his hands. And when we started applying that, he realized how intelligent and smart he was, But then we picked and chose those social environments where we would engage and work on only that engagement as something he learned. So it was something of interest to him that we would go to. And then it made it easier. So it was we're applying all these things that Andrew's talking about. But I think too often we just say, oh, well, we're homeschooling now, so let's do the homeschool thing. And you forget so quickly that you're just trying to replicate what you left that didn't work. So,
right.
So think very carefully. Yes.
Which leads us to number 6, actually, if you jump to the next one.
Mm-hmm.
Minimize distractions, reduce resistance.
Yes.
So one of the big things for people with ADHD, and particularly myself, is separation of tasks by category. So I'll give you an example. I used to work from a home office a lot. I had my dedicated space in my home office, which was fine. But it was so easy. Like, oh, I want to go make a meal in the kitchen. I wonder what's happening out there. Or maybe I'll take a nap real quick and then I'll like jump back to what I was doing. But one of the big things is, if we know somebody is easily distractible, and even if not, is the environment we're in free of distractions? Is their video game set within line of sight? Is the like, are there things and alarms and triggers that will go off that you don't want them to? Is it going to break their focus? One of the big things, great book to read, and I'm sure a lot of people have read too, is the Atomic Habits book. And it just talks about every day, if we can just make it better by 1%. 1 single percent of just make it better. And so there's a great story in there about a cycling team that was underperforming, but the new coach came in and just maybe changed the uniforms from a more aerodynamic material, maybe changed the pillows they slept on to support them better. And they saw drastic change over time. So when we're looking at our school environment, are there distractions in the way that we're teaching, in the curriculum?
Yes.
Are there distractions in the room, the writing surfaces? Are the colors of the room distracting? Are there toys or things that will make the student, particularly someone with ADHD, just suddenly go, oh, that looks more novel. That looks like it's more urgent or more fun for me to do. And it's about reducing that resistance and minimizing that distraction.
Yeah. And too often we as parents, and I know I was guilty of this for a long time till I actually realized what was going on, is, I'd say, okay, I'm getting you started in this lesson now. I'm going to go take care of a couple of things and I'll be back. And then I totally lose the child. It's like, no, this is dedicated teaching time. And I had to just get into my head that this is important, that I keep them on task by being next to them. And that reduces the distraction, because all of a sudden I'm doing the dishes or that. And then all of a sudden a child disappears and I don't even know where they went. And I know this is a common problem because I hear it a lot. Yeah.
One of the big ones, particularly with ADHD, is they call it body doubling. Sometimes it's just another body in the room with them while they're doing the task. Makes them do the task. Sometimes they just need a body double. So if you do have another task that you have to do and you have to do it, try to do it within their space, that someone else is there to keep the accountability external. I don't have an excuse that they left me and therefore I have this window. Yeah. And again, nothing about this is easy. Parenting is super rewarding, but also challenging at the same time, and teaching on top of that. So that's probably the other thing too, between parent and teacher, finding that balance. That is something. And I'm saying all these things as though I'm an expert on it, but, not being a parent, but I just try to put myself in the shoes of the student and how I felt growing up learning as well. So, so that's a couple good tips in there. Hopefully that was helpful.
Absolutely. Yes. And whatever you can do to the environment. And I love the suggestion you made, just 1%. I mean, we tend to have this, all or nothing mentality, or if I don't change enough, it's just not going to happen. But those little things do matter. And so just to be just to observe and say, what little thing can we change maybe this week that may make things better? And then we'll just keep taking those steps forward.
My 1% this year anyway is I've started to try to coordinate my days and weeks better. I've never used a physical schedule before, so I'm really putting that into effect now. So I've always just written endless lists, but it's, my way that I explain it is like, I call it vomiting in a box. Sounds terrible. It's a terrible concept, but the way that my brain kind of works, and a lot of parents might be like this too, is we're kind of like a stream of consciousness kind of person. Like, I've got to do this, and then that led me to do this, but that's letting my actions dictate my goals.
Yeah.
So I call that kind of like vomiting out things, but giving yourself boxes in which you're like, okay, I have dedicated an hour of my day for home organization. Whatever home organization thing sparks the thing to do it, I can do all those things. And what you were just saying earlier, get a calendar out. Buy a calendar that's like you can print out or keep a digital calendar. And every day, just write the 1% thing that you did. One sentence.
Absolutely.
One sentence. I moved the table away from the TV area. Boom, tick. Another day it's like, he or she likes to write different lessons in different colors. We got some colored pencils. And it's those kinds of things that by the time that you get to the end of the year, or actually just do it for 30 days and see if it becomes a habit. And that's 30 steps closer to them being a better learner. So something to do.
Great encouragement. Love that. Yeah. So number 7.
Utilize resources and collaborate. Okay. Yeah. So not to do a pitch here, but look at homeschool courses and education resources that are crafted in that way or have some sort of learning principle in the way that they're trying to teach. Do they discuss their teaching methodology or their pedagogy on what they're learning? Or is there some method to improvement here? So you don't have to do that work of manually doing it. Sometimes there are programs, music programs or singing programs or even math programs that are designed, they've got revisionary questions. They've got structures. They've got different stimuli and examples and multifaceted things. I don't have to make it up. So when you're selecting courses and when you are going through content, you, in your mind, if not physically, write it down. What is the profile of my student? Build yourself a profile. So when you're looking at a curriculum and you're going to the big homeschool events or conventions, and you're like trying to pick out books for curriculum, look at the curriculum and say, if it's between math A and math B, this one has a better teaching and that I can apply the way that I like to teach and the way that I like to school.
Yeah, I think too often when we go and do that, parents will look at it from their child's perspective. And I have always taken the opposite because I learned very early on, I bought some curriculum and I opened the box and I'm like, no, and I shut it.
That was a bad idea.
Because it was touted for everything my child needed, but everything I could not do.
Right.
And so
that's a big thing,
it's huge. Yes. You've got to be able
knowing
to
your limitations too.
Yes.
Like knowing how you teach and what areas you need help in. Like you augment that with resources, but also collaborate. Find somebody else, find a group. You may find other parents. Like when you're assessing a co-op, do you have a look at, hey, the other parents in the group, what are their strengths? Exactly. And how do we balance and where can I help them and where can they help me? And the biggest challenge is writing it down. They say, I think it's like in the 40-something% of goals that are written down have a greater achievement. So all these things that we're talking about, don't just try to think on the fly. Absolutely. At most, each of us, if you don't have ADHD, can remember about 7 things. If you have ADHD, you can remember 3 things. So, create a list of things that this year that you want to do, be a more effective homeschool teacher. And do these criteria, build a profile, look at a profile of yourself. What are my teaching strengths? Where am our points of conflict with our kids and our students?
Yes.
And then what about our co-ops that we're in? Where are the strengths? What do they get from there, and how can I provide it? Like, we have such an opportunity as homeschooling parents to really make education and learning and just learning to grow as a person so much further and so much more catered to our children.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Yeah. But it does take some planning and some goals and little by little. And it doesn't mean you have to be the most organized person or somebody that's always on top of your game. That just doesn't happen when you've got multiple kids learning all at different levels. But yes, it's just being mindful in that direction, that this is the goal, and you get better and better at it. I mean, I homeschooled for 19 years, and I just started out a mess, and eventually learned enough to get my kids through. But yeah, it's a lot of grace on yourself, but yet,
and 100%,
you learn.
I think the big thing though is set a baseline for yourself. Don't this is how I currently teach. And ask yourself what your big goal is. Like, I want to improve my teaching. These are areas that I can improve. And then just do the 1% thing again. How can I improve that one thing by 1%? But if we don't document how we're teaching and how our kids are learning, we don't know where we are.
Exactly.
So
and you don't know how far you've come either. And then you go, did we fail this year? And I find people that write down, we did have one question from a viewer, and this fits really good right in here. Yeah. She had asked about, customizing curriculum and planning and then using an IEP. And I think this is where that comes in, is we have a free IEP download on our website. And a lot of parents say, well, why would I add that extra paperwork to myself? And I say, because you're going to look at the what you write about your child in 1 year, and you're going to get to the end of the year and go, did we really learn anything? Did they make any progress? And when you go back and read that summary, you realize, wow, we did make progress. But if you don't keep track of those things and write them down, you lose track of how much is actually happening, because we focus so much on the tiny little things that aren't working well, and we forget just how far we have come and how far our kids have come.
100%. The other big thing, and why this is a really great diary that I got. It has not just my day schedule, but my goals for the day. It's really, really great planner. It's by a company called My Goals, actually out of Australia. But it has on here the top 5 things I want to do today. It has daily habits I want to do, what I'm focused on today, and then breaking the day down. I'm just going to mention a couple things, and everyone should look it up. Things like an Eisenhower matrix. So it breaks it into 4 quadrants: important and urgent, important but not urgent, and having little graphs like that for a day of the tasks and assigning them to sections. The other thing that they say, one of the good strategies is like the 3-3-3, which is like 3 hours for a project, 3 hours for communication, and 3 hours for completing tasks. So if you want to give yourself a 3-hour block where you're working on a project, 3 hours that you can work through a task list, and 3 hours that you can communicate, it helps you to structure your day. So this is for parents who maybe need a little bit more help with structuring. Yeah. And big thing is, don't make it hard on yourself. One of the things in that Atomic Habits book, which I'm plugging a lot, but the example talks about a runner. There's a runner who wakes up every morning to run with his buddies at like 5 or 6 in the morning. And the way that he achieves that is he puts his phone and alarm clock on the other side of the room with the clothes he packed the night before, with the shoes and the clothes. And that way, when he gets up to turn off the alarm, the resistance to putting on the clothes is not that hard. But one of the things that the book talks about is the first time you go for a run to the end of the block and back, and you're done. And it's about creating low-hanging fruit. If your first task was just to put the clothes on and then go back to sleep, do it. If you do that for a week, the next one is like, oh, I might go outside and walk to the next house and back. So the same thing applies with what we're doing here. Let our small actions dictate to us let our large goals through small actions dictate where we're going, and not letting our actions dictate our goals.
Yeah.
So if your phone is by the side of your bed, you're allowing the action and ease of reaching for that phone to dictate, I'm going to stay up all late doom scrolling through Instagram or whatever it is.
Right. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. And also, I love this. The thing that you have in here is community, really surrounding yourself with other people who are supporting you in those goals, or who can complement you in areas where you're not as gifted. That is just crucially important. We try to do so many things on our own. You've got to surround yourself with other people.
Right. And at that point, again,
point that out. Yeah.
Make accountability external.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Do not allow yourself to give yourself permission. I mean, hey, you're allowed to give yourself forgiveness. We all make mistakes. We're imperfect. That's not what I'm saying. But giving yourself permission to not try to do the right thing. Just removing those barriers from those things. Like if you've scheduled a meeting to meet with other parents regularly on Friday, and we're each going to bring a teaching component, do it. Yep. Schedule it. They're going to hold you accountable. You're going to hold them accountable. There's nothing worse than showing up and being, I have nothing to add. Right. So it's just that thought of just what can we do outside of our internal minded choices to push something forward.
Absolutely. So number 8, integrate tech.
Great. We talked a ton about that already too. Little timer clocks, Pomodoro clocks are great. These little things are physical novelty things. We talked about Roblox. Find technology that will help you move things along.
Absolutely.
Again, everything has to be through the lens of back at point 1. Understand yourself and the learner as well. And always look through those lenses. Do I join this co-op? Do I buy this little clock? Do we need colored pencils? So that your decisions are informed decisions and not impulsive, like, I think we could get that.
Exactly. Like you're scrolling through Instagram and somebody's like, this is the greatest thing. It changed our homeschool. It's like, but it might not change yours. You have to be just very discerning about, all
beware magic pills.
Things.
There is,
yes, exactly.
There are no magic pills to education, and something that is a lifelong journey.
Absolutely.
It's a commitment to do. And if we want to do things right, it's just going to take the elbow grease.
Absolutely.
But if there are tools that make it easier, great. So little things like this little clock, for sure.
Yeah. And I found that as my kids got older, I would have them search like for an app, like a mind mapping app. My daughter decided she wanted to write some curriculum, and I said, okay, well, what is going to help you? And so she downloaded, I don't know how many apps before she found one that actually worked. But then, for them to learn how to, evaluate those tools too, as they get older and they've used some, that's a life skill. That's
100%.
Well, yeah.
It's learning to ask.
All right.
Why.
So number 9, don't do it alone.
Yep. We talked about that.
Right.
Again, communities, parents, teachers, programming, and people as wonderful as you, Peggy, like committed to doing this, having these conversations. Use resources. Anyone listening to this podcast, you're already steps ahead. You are constantly getting inspired or ideas and having conversations and strategies and different perspectives on learning. The more diverse you are, the more you can apply your experience to that, right?
Absolutely. Yes, that's so true. Yes, we can't sit in our own little space and expect to grow. You have to be challenged in everything that we do, not just our 100%. Kids, but us as well. Yeah. All right. Number 10, rinse and repeat.
Yep. And that's it. Like, the 9 steps before this one, look at your processes. How can I 1% what I'm doing here after each lesson?
That self-evaluation.
But not just that, get feedback from your child.
Yeah.
Hey, how was that? Was that fun? Was today's lesson fun? This part was kind of boring. I didn't like that. But why was it boring? Okay, cool. And if we can and at times it's going to be difficult, but you know, and we have to push through a lesson. But if we can make it easier for them to absorb the specific lesson, why wouldn't we? So
Absolutely.
So those are the 10 steps. And again, with the handout, we've got a sample lesson plan from the Vocal Gym as well on how your voice works. And that's broken down into these kinds of sections, and we try to divide it up as well. And the math lesson will attach too. Peggy, if I remember,
I'll share all those links on.
Yeah,
I'll share all the links to things that Andrew talked about and in the show notes on YouTube as well as with the podcast. So you can look at those two places. I'll also put it up onto Facebook eventually. But yeah, that's great. So then you're not looking for URLs, but I would like you to talk about Throga a little bit and your website and what people can find there. Cause I actually did a review for Andrew. So just on the program itself, I was just amazed at how well it was designed. And I know, Andrew, you were behind a lot of that.
I know you had a conversation with Richard about that in a podcast previously, but
yes, he did a webinar with me too. So there's a lot of good content from you guys.
I love Richard. We are polar opposites as human beings. Richard is very structured, very scientific, very organized. And I have ADHD, but I'm also like, free-flowing information. But, however, the big thing here, and I wonder if I can share the screen.
You should be able to go down and present and do a screen share.
Yeah, let's see if that works. If I can get this to work. Share screen. How your voice works. Great. Cool. So, the Vocal Gym, Throga is the overall brand company, but the Vocal Gym was a course we designed because we saw it was missing so much in the homeschool environment. So many kids wanted to learn how to sing, but one of the big challenges, and I had this going through school, was like learning how the instrument actually works. A lot of times concepts with singing are like, imagine there's a string and it's pulling at the top of your head, or sing forward. But what does that mean? And it's so frustrating that you have to do these abstracts and convert them to what does it actually mean? Whereas piano or guitar, you just put your finger here. This is the form for your hand. But if I go through this is the lesson that I was talking about earlier about how your voice works. A lot of the parts that I had learned over time, particularly when it comes to my learning differences, is I need as much stimuli to absorb the information as possible. So, or if a lesson is too dragging or it takes too long, I need the information in quick points. I already understand the concepts. I just need quick information. Or I need to read more in depth, or I need a picture to explain it, or I need an activity to follow it up. These are all the things that as we're going through and talking to Richard, hey, Richard, like we can implement these learning techniques that education has been using so effectively for so long and take the burden off parents. So it's a comprehensive course that breaks down learning how to sing in a very straightforward and structured way, but also using science. Not only learning how to sing, you're learning how
I think you could replace a science credit for the amount of content that you have in that program.
And the fine arts credit as well.
As a fine arts credit. Yes, exactly. That's it's quite amazing. And then you have extra projects that students can work on. I just have to throw out some good words for you guys because it is amazing.
We're so proud of it. Like it's been the entire time of the pandemic, we started developing specifically a homeschool curriculum. Really looking at the home environment, looking at how kids, from middle school upward, it is a little bit young for elementary, but for middle school upwards, how they could take some of those principles and learning it. And it's definitely a scientific course, but it's also helping you understand yourself and your voice and just how much the voice, I know we don't have any problems talking sometimes, but being asked to sing in front of others, how vulnerable our singing voice is and how core it is to who we are in developing that. When I started working with Richard, it was such a joy. it was hard, but it was such a joy to really help with that.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. And that website is Throga. It's THROGA.com. And I will again have that link in the show notes for you. Well, Richard, or Andrew, sorry. You're talking so much about Richard.
I know.
But Andrew, thank you so, so much. This has been an amazing conversation. Such good information. I'm super excited to share this with our audience who hasn't listened yet. I know a lot of people always watch afterwards. We haven't had any comments or questions come in while we've been live, but I'm sure that this will just be a blessing to many as they take the time to download the podcast or watch the show. So I appreciate you and just the time and just for what you're doing and how you're continuing to grow yourself so you can help others.
Thanks, Peggy. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yeah. So later this week, we have another broadcast, actually in 2 days. I'm going to be interviewing Steve Demme, who is the creator of Matthew C. and the founder of Building Faith Families and also the co-chair of SPED Homeschool. But he is going to be sharing a new perspective with us, something he hasn't actually ever spoke on. His son, Johnny, who has Down syndrome, is now in his 30s, and he is finding how much his son has been a blessing to people around him and just how surprising that is to him as a dad who really struggled when his son was born and having a disability to what his son has turned into and in the influence he's made in his own life. So Steve's going to be talking about that with us on Thursday. So you're going to want to join us for that conversation as well. And so definitely come back and join us again on our show. But we appreciate you, Andrew, and I'm sure this will not be the last time you'll be on. You
Happy to come back.
So many good things to say, and I'm excited to see all the pursuits that you guys have that you're working on. So to definitely check out Throga.com and then check back for the show notes and the links that we have on there. So I appreciate your time again, Andrew. Thanks again. Thank you all for watching, especially our new audience there on Instagram. And we'll make sure that we keep our weekly shows going there as well. So have a great week, everybody. God bless, and we'll see you next time. Bye. I want to take just a second to thank the team at Life Audio for their partnership with us on this podcast. If you go to lifeaudio.com, you'll find dozens of other faith-centered podcasts in their network. They've got shows about prayer, Bible study, parenting, and more.
This has been Empowering Homeschool Conversations with Peggy Ployer.
Hi, I'm Beckett Cook, host of The Beckett Cook Show. I lived as a gay man in Hollywood for many, many years until I had a radical encounter with Jesus 13 years ago. Since then, I've gotten my master's degree in seminary and published a book called A Change of Affection. On my podcast, The Beckett Cook Show, I sit down with fascinating Christian scholars and thinkers to address the lies of the culture and bring the biblical truth to bear on those lies. To start listening now, go to lifeaudio.com or search for The Beckett Cook Show on your favorite podcasting platform.